All right. We are live for another day of question period, along with other exciting news that is happening all around. Starting off with Trudeau warns Poilievre against amplifying erroneous narratives about Canada-US border. Liberals are hoping to talk Trump off his threat of imposing a 25% tariff on Canadian imports over concerns about illegal immigration and fentanyl flowing into the US. During Tuesday's question period, Poilievre told MPs that Trudeau has lost control of everything. He more or less has. It's pretty much true. He lost control of the borders, lost control of immigration, lost control of spending, and the deficit, said Poilievre. This has put Canada in an unbearably weak position. Trudeau responded by saying he believes Poilievre needs to reflect carefully on whether he really wants to amplify the erroneous narratives, which he says Americans are advancing when it comes to issues surrounding the border. Trudeau not taking any responsibility is the number one thing he has to play in his deck of cards. He does it time and time again. Diverts the blame, pushes it away, gaslights the opposition who hasn't been in power for almost a decade now, blames it on them time and time again, although he is the one in power. His government completely out of touch. His government MPs don't even want him in power. And we will get into that a little bit later. I have a little article to get into about that. On top of that, we have Air Canada is going the way of WestJet Ultra Basic by banning carry-ons in middle seat assignments for basic fares. I guess you're no longer allowed to take carry-ons for Air Canada flights. I don't know too much about that. This is just what is being shown here. I guess Air Canada is no longer playing games when it comes to carry-ons, which sucks because the carry-ons are the cheap way to go when it comes to flying. You don't have to pay the extra fees to get your baggage onto the plane. You don't have to pay for baggage fees and all that garbage. You could just take one or two carry-ons and you could essentially get away with that depending on where you are traveling and what you are doing. But I guess Air Canada said, nope, no longer allowed to do that. In some more crazy news that literally just happened, I was working out, and all of a sudden, this was popping up everywhere. UnitedHealthcare CEO fatally shot in a targeted attack in New York City. The CEO of UnitedHealthcare, Brian Thompson, was fatally shot in Manhattan early Wednesday morning outside of a company meeting at the New York Hilton Midtown in what top police officials are calling a brazen targeted attack. Gunmen who killed Brian Thompson, UnitedHealthcare CEO. What is going on down here? No, just stop playing that. My God. People making out while I'm trying to talk about stuff here. A gunman who killed the CEO is still on the loose. What we know about the suspect. This man is still at large. Looks like we have a couple photos here. The suspect has not been identified, but he is a light-skinned man. Whoa. And was wearing a gray-colored backpack, which NYPD Chief of Detectives Joseph Kennedy described as very distinctive. So I guess that's what the guy looks like. Kind of wild, man. This guy walks out, the CEO walks out of a meeting and then is just fatally shot in the chest. Wild. UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson shot, killed in Midtown, NYPD says. Up next, we have Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre speaking with reporters. This happened earlier today as well. Let's take a listen.
C'est clair qu'après 9 ans, Justin Trudeau a perdu le contrôle.
All right, so I'm obviously going to skip over the French parts.
Perdu l'inflation, des finances. La neige tombe. La ministre avait posé pas un énonce que la ministre a réussi à permettre que ça. On va lancer les contrôles de nos besoins de revendiquants. Everything after 9, une fois de ce gouvernement. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here today. Justin Trudeau has lost control of everything after 9 years. He's lost control of spending, lost control of the deficit, lost control of immigration and the border. And this has real consequences for real people. He's doubled the cost of housing, meaning that 80% of Canadians now believe that home ownership is only for the very rich. He's doubled the number of gun crimes with his catch and release criminal justice policy. He's doubled the number of people lined up at food banks with a carbon tax that on the farmer who produces the food and the trucker who ships the food, therefore all who buys the food. He has doubled the national debt, adding more debt than all prior prime ministers combined. And now he's completely lost control of our finances. Remember, his minister said there would be a cap on the deficit of no more than $40 billion. $40 billion. And now we hear that the deficit has gone much further than that. Why won't the finance minister tell us the true number? What's she hiding? Is she hiding that Trudeau lost control of the deficit this year, just like every year? Yesterday, you all asked her if she would have a fall economic update. She wouldn't answer. The Prime Minister's office told you that there would be a fall update. So apparently these two don't speak. Or maybe they're fighting over how big and out of control the deficit actually is. Once again, such a fight would be a loss of control by the Prime Minister. And so we're today, common sense Conservatives, are calling for the Finance Minister to introduce a fall update to indicate whether she's keeping her promise to cap the deficit at $40 billion or whether Trudeau has completely lost control of the deficit once again. Not only will we cooperate to let her introduce that fall update, we will actually give her a Christmas gift. We'll give her 2 hours out of our Conservative opposition motion day on Monday for her to stand on her feet and tell us how much she's lost control of the nation's finances. Canadians need a common sense, Canada First plan to protect our economy, our system of immigration, our borders, to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. So the challenge is over to Chrystia Freeland and Justin Trudeau. Stand on your feet. Monday at 4 p.m. We'll clear the deck so you can do it, and tell us how badly you've lost control of the nation's finances and the inflation and taxes Canadians pay as a result. Thank you very much.
Why are you continuing to...
All right, there you have that. We actually have another thing from yesterday, late yesterday. Opposition leaders on meeting with PM Canada US issues. This was the big caucus meeting that happened. Briefly just talked about it in the article we read about Poilievre, quote unquote, making erroneous claims. So let's take a listen to all of the different leaders and what they have to say walking out, specifically after the meeting is done.
Mr. Poilievre, how was your meeting?
Good.
What did you discuss?
We discussed the possibility of unfair and unjustified American tariffs, and I made the point that these kinds of actions, were they ever to go ahead, would be damaging to the United States just as they would be to Canada. It should be obvious and easy to make these arguments to the Americans, because they would be doing enormous damage to their own economy if they were, first, to stop importing vital Canadian goods that serve their consumers and provide inputs to their industries, and secondly, invite necessary retaliatory tariffs from their closest neighbor and best friend. And I told the Prime Minister that, of course, at every opportunity I will make those arguments and make Canada's case on behalf of all Canadians to put Canada first, which is what we all need to do.
Avez-vous été rassuré par le plan, peut-être que M. Trudeau vous a présenté, peut-être le compte-rendu qu'il a fait de son dîner? Qu'est-ce que vous lui avez dit?
Pas exactement, mais parce qu'il n'a pas ajouté d'autres informations à ce que je savais déjà. Mais je suis un peu rassuré par le fait qu'un tel geste par M. Trump serait très endommageant à l'économie américaine. Donc, ce n'est vraiment pas dans son intérêt de faire des dommages aux travailleurs de col bleu américaines, de consommateurs, d'augmenter le coût de l'énergie pour les Américains. Un président qui se présente avec la plateforme de rendre les Américains plus riches et l'énergie plus abordable devrait faire exactement le contraire que les tarifs sur le Canada. Ça serait très, très endommageant pour les Américains, tout comme le Canada. So, as I was saying in French, this is a president, an incoming president who was elected on the promise to make America richer. These tariffs would make America poorer. They would raise energy prices when he promised that he would cut them in half. They would kill American jobs and drive up American cost of living. And those are arguments that I intend to make to anyone in a position of authority who will listen to them between now and January the 20th. And I think it should be easy to make those arguments and easy to convince the Americans, even Mr. Trump's most nationalist supporters, that this is bad for them and bad for America, and that the right thing to do for Americans is more free trade with their best friend and closest ally here in Canada.
Avez-vous fait des demandes précises à M. Trudeau? Si oui, lesquelles?
Trump aux États-Unis, Trudeau de meilleure façon massive, and he has caused, Canada est en train de grandir massivement. Donc, c'est pour ça que les Canadiens sont pauvres après 9 ans de Justin Trudeau. So I was just saying, she was asking in French, what are the demands that I've made? And obviously, we demand that the Prime Minister fix the disorder that he's caused at the border, fix the immigrations problems that he has caused. But he also has to reverse the job-crushing tax increases that he's imposing right now. He's in the process today of raising taxes on energy, on work, on investment. This policy has driven $500 billion out of our economy into the hands of Donald Trump. I mean, Trump's tariffs would do damage, but Trudeau's taxes are already doing that damage. So let's reverse those damages. Right now, we're going into this problem in a state of weakness. The Prime Minister has broken our immigration system, broken our bank, broken our borders. We need to fix what he broke to put Canada first.
You say you were going to offer to make those comments. Where would you offer to make them? Would you travel to the U.S.? Are you going to seek meetings with American governors, go on Fox News?
Are you in touch with any of
Just still asking him questions as he walks away. No F's given. I absolutely love it.
Americans?
Les ressources sont réparties dans la vicinity.
Okay, so I would assume he's probably going to speak French the whole time. I'm going to skip over him, and we're going to go straight to our favorite here, Jagmeet.
One of the things that I wanted to reiterate, and I've said it many times, is that what Trump is
He's not actually my favorite or our favorite here. That was just sarcasm.
threatening is very serious. We need to take it seriously. That was impressed upon the Prime Minister. I wanted to make it very clear we can't take this approach that'll be okay. We've been here before. No, none of that is the right approach. We need to take this seriously, and I want to see an all-hands-on-deck approach to make sure that we are fighting to protect Canadian interests. The one area that we can actually respond to immediately, and I wanted to talk about this, is that the border security. We know that this is something that Trump has raised as a concern. The Conservatives cut the number of officers at our borders, and as a result, the border security officers themselves are saying we're understaffed. We can't do the work we need to do. So we say we need to, New Democrats' position, we need to immediately hire 1,100 CBSA officers just to get back to the level where we can actually do the minimum required, and then look at hiring more officers to do a better job of protecting.
Yeah, look, anything he says, it's just so hard to believe him when time and time again he says he's for Canadians, but is waiting for his pension. He's waiting for that date to come before he does literally anything. He wants his retirement money. He does not care about you guys. He does not care about you and I. That is just the simple fact of the matter. I wonder if she's drunk. Let's see.
We're reminded that false information getting into the U.S. sticks there forever. The Prime Minister reminded us of how many Americans still think the terrorists from 9/11 came into the U.S. from Canada. We all know that was a lie. We all know it was nonsense. It was disproved every which way to Sunday, but there's still people in the U.S. who bring it up. So we were reminded, please, do not say things that aren't true. Don't play into Trump's narrative. We are able to do more around the border. We're able to do more. I asked the Prime Minister, we're pointing out to them how many drugs and guns come into Canada from the U.S. Yes, we need more CVSA officers. We need to make sure the border is secure both ways.
Mr. Singh just said that Mr. Poilievre was still trying to score political points in there. Was that your impression?
Absolutely.
Can you allow?
Of course, everybody's going to say that about him. It's all about fucking scoring political points for the opposition. Yeah, he doesn't actually care about Canadians or anything. It's just a unified NPC update for everybody that is not the Conservatives by the sounds of it. They all repeat the same things. The National Post coming out with a very funny thing here. 5 things we learned about Melanie Joly or Jolly or whatever her name is. In the NYT profile that declares her top contender to replace Trudeau. Are you kidding me? Are you for real? Oh my god, dude. These people are deranged. Yes, Trudeau is easily one of the worst leaders of all time, but what makes you think that Melanie is going to be any better? This is the woman who just figured out that butter prices are too high. Guess who regulates the prices of butter in Canada? Oh, that's right, the government.
I know that people are angry. I know there's frustration. We're all frustrated when we go and buy our groceries. And, you know, I was looking at just buying a pound of butter over the weekend. It's nearly $9 in Montreal. I know that people are angry.
It's nearly $9 in Montreal. Oh, of course, she's one of those Quebecers as well who probably only thinks about the people of Quebec. Something is trending right now on Twitter. Snow Mexicans has been trending on Twitter. I guess, I don't know. I think it's absolutely hilarious. That's just me. I take it as an absolute joke. There's been a lot of drama and beef going around the internet these past few days based on the Canada-US relations with the tariff increase and all of this stuff going on. People just don't know how to take a joke anymore. If you can't make fun of yourself every now and again, then I don't know, man. I don't know. You can't be too serious about literally everything. Speaking of not being serious, Justin Trudeau will attend a 10 a.m. caucus meeting, and he will attend question period. How exciting. How exciting indeed. We have quite a few things we could watch. Let's take a look at Alberta's premiere.
Applications on that. And many of the Western U.S. states have similar challenges. So that'll be one of the reasons that I'm going. I'll also aim to have a number of bilateral agreements with different states where we can talk about our common interests. You have to remember, Alberta has a $188 billion trade relationship with the United States. Our next closest trade relationship is with China, which is $10 billion. Our relationship with Mexico is $2.9 billion. So the relationship we have with American states,
$2.9 billion,
I would say, is the most important trade relationship that we have. And the governors are going to be our largest advocates in talking about the need to keep those trade ties open and tariff-free so that they can get a reliable supply of energy to fuel their economies, their industries, and make sure that their consumers pay lower prices. So that'll be the message that I take down, is that I'm looking for allies. I was also recently asked to join the Governor's Council on Energy Security with 12 other governors, and that'll be another venue that we'll be able to continue to advance that interest.
So while we were listening to this, I found this. Trudeau honors Canada's 2024 Olympic athletes. What is he wearing? Oh my god. Let's take a little listen at this. This is going to be comical.
An amazing and incredible sport infrastructure team with amazing leadership, and the governments are happy to support. But we will never have the kinds of machines that other countries have in terms of just the depth of intensity of investments, of science. I mean, we do it, we make up for that, and we compete on the world stage, yes, with a lot of good investments, but also with an unbelievable amount of heart. And when we see a Canadian on the podium, it's because we know there were coaches, there were family members, but there was an entire community behind that. What we build in this country, and when we celebrate victories on the podium or victories on the field or just extraordinary Olympians.
Yeah, those seem to be the only victories Canadians are getting right now, and even then we're barely winning in the Olympics.
Invoking the notwithstanding clause.
I don't believe we'll have to. I think that both the Charter as well as our Bill of Rights has the ability to make decisions and make policy that can be seen to be reasonable, that is evidence-based. And I think that the decisions that we made are both of those things. The CAS report that came about demonstrated after 4 years of research that there are a significant lack of evidence about what the long-term impact are on kids. And so we think a cautious approach is the one to take. We also know that it is not unusual to put limitations on children about the kind of decisions that they're able to make that will affect their health. We don't allow them to smoke. We don't allow them to do drugs. We don't allow them to drive. And so we think that making permanent, unalterable, or permanent decisions that will affect one's fertility is an adult decision. And I think that will pass the reasonable test.
And for my follow-up, just switching gears slightly, today may be the last day of the fall sitting. You have faced some criticism from Albertans who say they wanted to see more support from your government on things like affordability and access to health care. Wondering what you can point to, I guess, in the last 6 weeks that you've done to help them and what you want them to remember from this session.
Well, we've had 3 budgets that we've brought forward that have established policies in spending and a direction that have massively impacted the lives of Albertans for the better. The $15 a day daycare that most of our parents are able to get, that saves families $700 per child per month. That's a major break that they have to put more dollars in their pocket. We also have an overall initiative that we've brought forward on electricity that is now beginning to see the fruition, going from 32 cents a kilowatt hour now down to 12 cents a kilowatt hour or less. That's a massive change, and there'll be more that will come on electricity. We have also had a number of the indexation decisions that we made were very important. Not only does that help with our personal income taxes, where every year by indexing you're not seeing inflation eating away at your purchasing power, but also for those who rely on government services. We have about 7 or 8 programs that we index. That's going to put a lot more money in their hands. We continue to support food banks. We continue to have the low-income transit pass. We have brought through a 25% seniors discount that's going to be ongoing, and we're looking to expand that. So I would say that the decisions that we've made in the past have made lives more affordable. Today we continue to have the highest income on a per worker basis, highest average weekly earnings, highest workforce participation rate, lowest taxes. Creating that environment and maintaining that environment is vitally important for affordability. The best thing that could happen for affordability is for the federal government to end its carbon tax.
Hell yeah, that is the absolute truth. While we were listening to that, I found this video here. Skeletor himself has actually come out with a statement on refugee sponsorship pause that is going to happen in Canada. Let's take a listen.
He says, first off, just to have a chance to talk to you, just why are we seeing the pause for the private refugees and that is going? Pause for private refugees, and do you expect to hit other groups?
Well, it's part of the larger plan of making sure that the reductions make sense, and in this case, when it comes to the private sponsorships, there's an oversupply of folks out there. So it's about being real with Canadians and making sure that when we make those dedicated commitments to people to resettle fleeing war or oppression, that we're doing it in the right way and not entertaining false hope. So it's an unfortunate reality of the situation we're in.
And just with some people being surprised by Friday's announcement for some of the other immigration changes we've seen recently, there were press conferences, things like that. This one, there was just a notice put up on the IRCC website and a notice published in the Gazette. Why was that the course of action taken for the broader public?
Well, I think, in fairness, that a lot of these organizations were bracing for it as part of the reduction in our levels plan that we announced at the end of October. And with all these measures, I think people have not been used to the reality that we are, in some cases, reducing. And in the context of a government that does actually engage a lot with these organizations, I'm always willing to continue those conversations, but I wouldn't say that, in my mind, that it was a surprise.
And what does the work look like over the next year in working with these groups, since there was the commitment to work with them on what the future looks like for intake?
Well, the commitment's still there to work with people. I mean, there are things that we can't plan for, and Canada always has to have an open heart, but we also have to be realistic with Canadians and the amount of people that we can take in and properly.
Yes, Canada is full. We can barely feed the people that are here right now. And over the past few years, we have hit record high numbers of immigration and asylum seekers. Canada is pausing private refugee sponsorship applications until 2026. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think that is long enough. 2 years when we have taken in millions and millions of people. Our total population has increased drastically just in the past 3 years alone. I will try to find these immigration numbers on the government side of Canada, and I will show you them.
Interesting that one of the debates that we were having on a different bill in the legislature, the NDP agreed that the brain is still forming when you're a child. In fact, it's still forming up until age 25. And so if you're going to make the argument that kids can't make certain decisions because they don't have high executive function and they don't understand the consequences all the way up to 25, you certainly can't argue that they should make these kinds of life-changing decisions at age 10. That's why I say, I think the evidence is there about brain development. I think the evidence there is about understanding when is an appropriate time to make adult decisions. I think we have a very common understanding that parents have the ability to make decisions on behalf of their kids until they become of an age to make them themselves. And that's what we'll be prepared to bring forward in court.
Okay, we have time for one more in the room, then we're going to go to the phones.
Cabby Mudder there with Global. Thanks for taking my questions. We'll start off with the sports minister saying that the former head of the Edmonton Elks football team will lead the committed task with improving athlete safety in combative sports. Can you just get your reaction?
Okay, they're going to talk about athlete safety. That is all fine and dandy, but I wanted to show you guys the impact report here of immigration on Canada's population from 2014 into 2027. This is what they have charted. If you take a look here in 2022 and 2023 and in 2024, 2.5, 3.1, 1.9, 1 million, roughly 1.2 million, roughly 800,000 just within this year and the past 2 years. You look at every year previous to this, it barely breaks the 1.5. Only one time did it actually break past 1.5. And then 2020, COVID happened, blah, blah, blah. They stopped all of that. Everything shut down. And then all of a sudden, 2022, boom. They almost double. And then in 2023, literally a double from 2019, 2018. Literally insane. And you wonder why things are so bad here. You wonder why we can't house people or feed people, because we keep bringing in millions of people. It's insane. It's not a good policy, and they're just realizing it now.
Different rules in different parts of the province, that everybody understands what the access to electricity will be, that there's a preference for low water usage. That was what the minister was talking about alternatives to cooling. There are some data centers that use glycol instead of water, which I think we're pretty enthusiastic about, because if you can find a way to have the cheap power and limit your water use and then be able to take advantage of the colder climate, those are things that are definitely going to be an attraction, I think. But let me turn it over to Glubish, and he can tell you what the opportunity would be.
Yeah, thanks, Premier. I can tell you we're talking to all of the household names of all the biggest tech companies in the world. They all have an interest in building significant infrastructure, and they know that Alberta has a lot to offer. And they're very excited to work with us to explore specific projects here. And so my concierge team is working with probably about 10 or 12 different companies right now on different projects. And we're going to keep working closely with them to help advance their projects. We want to, again, make sure that these make sense for Alberta. We want to make sure that nothing will compromise reliability or affordability of our grid. And we want to make sure that Albertans are going to benefit through incremental tax revenues from this infrastructure that gets built. And we believe that by working arm in arm with these investors and with these project proponents, that we can get a win-win for everybody, and especially a win for Alberta.
Great. We have time for a couple more questions, so we're going to go to the phones. Operator, first caller, please.
Your first caller comes from the line of Rick Bell from Post Media. Your line is now open.
Good morning. A question for the Premier. I'll have a question and then I will have a supplementary. The question is, the NDP voted no to your Sovereignty Act motion, and yesterday the NDP leader, Mr. Nenshi, talked about how he thought it was play acting, that it would do nothing, that it was just for show, that it actually gets us further away from what the oil patch needs. And I also believe, I don't think there was an NDP MLA that even spoke to the motion. So what is your reaction to the fact that the NDP voted no?
This is kind of funny. Like phone call-ins for the Premier.
I would love to see the NDP finally stand up for Alberta and be on Team Alberta rather than Team Trudeau, because it's very, very clear that this is an attack on our industry. It's very clear from the statements of the federal environment minister, even the federal energy minister. Their objective is to keep our production in the ground. And there's no margin, I don't think, in a party that represents Alberta and Alberta interests and steward this resource on behalf of all taxpayers to side with Trudeau on this. So we invited them to send a very strong message that that they believe in the Constitution, that they believe in in our obligation collectively as government officials to make sure that we maintain authority over the production and development of this resource for the benefit of all Albertans, and they declined. But I feel very confident that what we are doing is going to protect our industry. It's going to allow us to double our oil and gas production, which is what I have aspirationally put out there. We still have we're at the lead in technology to be able to capture and sequester CO2, so we'll be able to address emissions in a different way. And I think Albertans and industry are behind us on this one.
And the supplementary, which follows from your answer, at the same scrum, Mr. Nenshi was asked about how he's often coupled by the UCP with Prime Minister Trudeau. And he advised you that it was not the right thing to just say you're either for Trudeau or against Trudeau, that you should get new talking points and you should stop blaming Trudeau and him for everything. So he objects to this. Well, what is your view of that?
Look, you have a choice. You either stand up for Alberta's energy sector or you stand up for the punitive policies coming through by the Trudeau government. It is the Trudeau government, propped up by the NDP, that are attacking our province, that are making it illegal to talk about our emissions record, that is passing policy that would shut in production, that would compromise our ability to pay for the programs that Albertans care about. And so that is the choice that's on the table. We may see a change in government at the federal level, at which point we'll have a new partner and hopefully have a more constructive relationship. But we don't have that right now. We have attempted over the last 2 years to try to get alignment on our strategy of increasing production and reducing emissions, and they continue to refuse to work with us. So you've got a choice when you're an opposition leader. You can side with Alberta or you can side with Trudeau. He's chosen to side with Trudeau.
Okay, we have time for a couple more questions. So, operator, next caller, please.
Your next caller comes from the line of Michelle Belfontaine from CBC. Your line is open.
Oh, hi there. Thanks for taking my question. I have a question from my Fort McMurray colleague. I'm not sure if the Premier wants to answer this one or if the Minister would like to. So he's asking, in the past, you guys have said that Wood Buffalo would benefit from the province's AI strategy because the region has the energy to fuel data centers and cold weather would cool them down. So I'm wondering, in terms of the new AI strategy, are there places that the government has in mind to locate those AI centers?
I would say that anywhere that has a nearby natural gas resource is probably going to be the biggest beneficiary of the AI data center strategy, as well as those that have the ability to develop their own power. The reference to Fort McMurray is a bit of an inspiration because the oil sands companies developed behind the fence electricity, meaning they developed their own electricity so that they could develop their resource, and then they developed surplus electricity, which they sold back into the grid. And we think that that's a model that will work for AI data centers. That if companies want to be able to get approval quickly, and they have a partnership to develop their own power, and then they work with us to sell their excess, I think everybody wins from that kind of strategy. So Fort McMurray may well be one of those centers. Grand Prairie is certainly one of those centers. Central Alberta is certainly an opportunity, as well as over in my neck of the woods in Medicine Hat is also an opportunity. We happen to be a natural gas basin. We've got 200 trillion cubic feet of gas. And so really anywhere that has the ability to tap into that resource and get the infrastructure close by, I think is going to benefit. Did you want to add?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Premier. So it's a great question. And what I would just say to add to that is that, is to revisit some of the points I made earlier, which is that the folks building this infrastructure care about speed to market. That's super important. And so those municipalities that aim to join the province in our theme of red tape reduction, in accelerated approvals, in introducing more certainty and confidence and investor confidence. Those are the municipalities that are going to be leaders and the destinations of choice within Alberta. And so in the same way that my concierge program is offering support to folks who want to build this infrastructure and to operate it, we are also offering support to municipalities to say, if you think your municipality could be a great host to these types of projects, come talk to my team. We'll work with you, we'll coach you, we'll show you exactly what these folks want to see, and we'll work with you to put your strongest foot forward so that you can increase the chances of being host to some really exciting investment in your home community.
Thanks for that. And just as a follow-up, my colleague wants to know a little bit more specifically what benefit Wood Buffalo and Fort McMurray could derive from these centers.
When you think about the construction and all of the workers that would be required to build those and then operate them afterwards, as well as the auxiliary services that could develop around, one of the benefits that happens is on the personal and corporate income taxes that these installations would play. But for municipalities in particular, they charge property taxes and they charge machinery and equipment taxes. And that is normally on the value of the equipment that's on an installation. So I can see this being a brand new source of revenue. So if you can imagine having a 1,000 megawatt power plant co-located with all of the equipment to support a 1,000 megawatt data center, that is a lot of land and a lot of value that would be able to be subject to that kind of industrial taxation. So I think there's a really great value proposition for municipalities to host these kinds of installations.
Operator, next caller, please.
Your next caller comes from the line of Chris Barco from Calgary Herald. Your line is now open. Hi, this is a question for the Premier. Premier, if a 25% tariff is eventually applied by the United States on Alberta oil and gas, what is the province's expectation on the impact that it's going to have on government revenues, and what would your plan be to try and mitigate that effect?
The first step is helping Americans understand just how much they benefit from the fact that we export some 4.3 million barrels a day into their market, and that their refineries are purposed specifically for our Canadian blend of Western Canada Select, and that it's not easy to replace. If you try to replace it, you're looking at countries like Venezuela and Iraq and Iran. And so that's one of the arguments that we'll make. But secondly, I've seen some analysis that suggests that a 25% tariff, because we are such a substantial supplier to the United States, would end up increasing gasoline prices by up to $1 a gallon. And so that's going to have a big impact on American consumers, especially since one of the new administration's policies is to try to keep those energy prices low. So we want, I think, our friends in the United States to understand that we jointly benefit. We benefit from the production and the supply. They benefit from the lower prices. What would we do here? I guess it would be, I'd have to see. I mean, it's an extraordinary tariff on our exports. If it was at 10%, it would have been.
All right, we got some new stuff coming out here from the National Post saying the former Bank of Canada Governor Stephen Polos or whatever, he says we're in a recession. That's what the former Bank of Canada governor is saying. How dare the Bank of Canada call it a recession? It's a vibe session. Good Lord. I think that was actually something they had said in question period around those lines, yes. The $4.5 billion of borrowed money, along with the NDP wanting to make it $7 billion, hasn't even kicked it yet. Compassion, empathy, Trudeau. We're in a recession, says former Bank of Canada governor. There you go. That is breaking as we are sitting here. Breaking news.
Used by the expansion of the data centers in the province, and conversely, what impact will that have upon Alberta's climate plan to reach net zero emissions by 2050?
Yeah, great question, Chris. So we're still working on some of those numbers, but we know it's a big impact. If we're able to bring in thousands of megawatts of new data center infrastructure and the corresponding natural gas power generation, we're talking a significant increase in domestic demand for natural gas. This is good news for Alberta because it's going to create significant increased drilling, exploration, and production activity in rural Alberta. It's going to allow for increased distribution investment to get the gas to the different markets that need it. And it's going to generate significant incremental natural gas royalty revenues for the benefit of all Albertans. You know, when the Premier talks about wanting to double oil and gas production over the next number of years, this is going to play a significant role in helping us to get there. In terms of the emissions profile,
we now have full security footage of the yes, if you can read that word there, of the United Health CEO. We have full security footage. I can't show it, obviously, in its entirety, but you get the point just from that right there. You get the idea of probably what happens.
Natural gas. We can offer net zero natural gas power generation in Alberta for a fraction of the cost of nuclear energy. And that is really, it's either nuclear or hydro that are the only other net zero options that can produce the power reliably. And those projects are going to take 10 to 15 years to build. It's not going to take that long for natural gas. So the fact is, these folks need our natural gas.
Guys,
they need it right now.
We have what I believe is the House of Commons theatrics at its finest about to happen. We are about to see what I believe is the scepter. What do they call it? The mace of power, or the mace of reason, or truth, or something like that? Are they about to do the big spectacle walk-in? I forget what it... Somebody in the chat's going to correct me here, but I forget what it's called. The big golden... The big gold mace that sits on the desk. The ceremonial mace, yes, I think it's absolutely hilarious. They always do this on the CPAC site. They'll do scrums where they have MPs speak with reporters before question period, and for like a solid half hour, they'll just record the House of Commons doors, and people just walk back and forth. Literally nothing happens. It was the scepter of power last month. Now it's the... Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely wild. Ceremonial mace. Canada. Yeah, it's so funny. I don't know why, but I find it so funny that this thing is just carried around by a group of people. I don't know, man. Our politics are so strange. They're so weird. All right, well, I guess while we wait for the mace to get brought in, we can continue back with this.
Our power base. We've seen that in other provinces. Quebec has always been a net exporter of electricity, as has Ontario, as has British Columbia, as has Manitoba. The fact that other provinces have produced surplus energy to their needs is something we should look at as inspiration here. We should have surplus energy to our needs, and that would allow for us to be able to make sure consumers are protected at the same time as be able to fuel the significant growth that's happening here. The other thing is, we have to look at the speed of scale up. One of the companies that I've spoken with recently who is contemplating a $2.5 billion investment in 256 megawatts when they're built out, they want to start with about 56 megawatts and then scale up over 10 years to get to the 256. So we have the ability to accommodate, I believe, a certain number of projects, knowing that more will come on stream as their power needs are accelerating. So I think that we are perfectly situated from a private power market point of view to have that joint investment happening at the same time. But the overriding principle that we have is that we've got to make sure that we protect prices for Alberta consumers, because that helps our entire market. One of the advantages that you can have in being able to provide a stable business climate is you've got predictable low power rates and predictable low heating rates. And that's the reason why when we put the strategy forward, we're asking for AI data centers to be looking at and bringing additional power to the market. Did you want to add?
So the Premier's bang on, and just to provide a little bit of extra context, you're right, there's a large volume of applications in the queue with the Alberta Electrical Systems Operator, or the ISO. And, in Alberta, we've always been good at doing heavy industry at scale. Our oil and gas sector has been the foundation of that for a generation. But the fact is that our system was designed for a certain level of industrial activity. And what we are seeing from these data centers, the power demands are just so exponentially larger that we need to put some time and energy into revising how we're going to deal with this so that we can grow and scale, but we can do so responsibly in a way that does not compromise affordability or reliability of the grid. We know we can do it. Alberta is a can-do province. We know how to get stuff done. We know how to solve tough problems. And that's why we've broken the strategy out into two phases. The first phase is focusing on the low-hanging fruit of fast approvals and the concierge service for the off-grid infrastructure. We're going to continue working with those folks who are in the queue today, looking for grid-connected or grid-supported infrastructure. And then we're going to also work with Minister Neudorf in the Affordability and Utilities Ministry to bring forward recommendations on what Phase 2 will contain, which is a path forward to say, how do we scale the grid-supported infrastructure in a way that is responsible? We know we can do it, and if we do it right, the opportunity for Albertans is enormous, because we can create so much economic investment and benefit, create so many jobs, bring in more tax revenues, build a stronger and more stable grid. And so we're confident we can get the job done. We're committed to doing the hard work and the heavy lifting, and just stay tuned for early 2025. We'll have more to say on what Phase 2 looks like.
Colin, do you have a follow-up?
Yes. Another issue for ISO right now is a congestion study that is, describing millions of megawatts of electricity being curtailed, especially in the south region. Does that strategy will the solution to that play in at all to this strategy? Otherwise, we're talking about line upgrades.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is something that Minister Neudorf and I are looking at very closely. The fact is there are spots across our grid in different regions where the amount of load or demand for the power is not matched with the power generation, and as a result, sometimes you have power being generated that's not being used, and that's bad news for Albertans. That's bad for Alberta ratepayers, because the cost of that waste has to be borne by somebody. And so this is why phase 2 of our strategy is so important. By doing the heavy lifting and the homework to say, where are the pockets in Alberta where there's congestion? Could we pair a data center that is right-sized for that excess power and match it in a way that will not compromise reliability or affordability of the grid? We believe there are some pockets in the province where there's some great opportunities to introduce data centers that are fit for purpose, that will use up that congested supply. And the good news for Albertans is that if we get that right, their power bill is going to come down. Their transmission costs are going to come down. This is great news. There were some questions earlier today about what are we doing as a government on affordability. What I would tell you is we're leaving no stone unturned. We're taking a technology file like this and saying, how can we find a way to generate economic benefit? Yes, but also this is a way to reduce costs for every single Albertan across the province. So there's an enormous opportunity on the congestion in the network to pair that with the data center strategy here, and we're really excited to do that work.
Okay, thanks everyone. That's all the time we have today.
Thanks, everyone.
Alrighty, that is going to do it for the Alberta MP speaking. We have the bloc leader speaking, but I mean, he mostly speaks in French, so I mean...
Dans sa forme actuelle par le ministre Virani, par rapport au syndicat.
They do these reporter scrums, and I don't know, man. You can't even understand what the guy is saying. Alright, 10 minutes until question period begins. I want to thank everybody for joining that is still here. It has been a bit of a slow day to start off the stream, the show, whatever you want to call it. But Trudeau and Pierre should be attending question period today. It was in their itinerary, or at least it was in Trudeau's. I don't think Pierre has an itinerary that gets posted, but it should get very interesting during question period. I feel like it might be a bit of the usual, a bit of the usual suspects with their complaints, their script repeats, or whatever you want to call it. But I don't know, man. A lot has gone on with the US-Canada relations, and I don't think it is going to end well. If Trudeau gets back in power for another 4 years, I don't have words. That's pretty much it. That would be quite shocking if he does. And he's still going off in French. And the Scepter of Power, that's what I'm just going to call it. I'm just going to call it the Scepter of Power. I don't know if they have done the big walk-in for it yet, but they typically do it before the scrums happen. I went back into the video and I did not see it. Take a listen to, we have a clip from the Auditor General's report. Take a listen to that. Take a little listen to that briefly.
Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour. On behalf of the Government of Ontario and in my capacity as President of the Treasury Board, I'm pleased to be here today with the Deputy Premier and Minister of Health, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and Mr. Michael Lindsay. Today, we're here to respond to the Auditor General's 2024 annual report, which was tabled in the Ontario Legislature earlier this morning. As a government, we will review the Auditor General's report. Building on their recommendations, we will further our efforts to ensure that our government delivers the best value for money possible through prudent fiscal management. By doing so, we are not only addressing current needs, but laying a strong fiscal foundation for future generations. Merci. Thank you very much. We will now be happy to take questions.
Why are the people of Ontario on the hook for $2.2 billion to redevelop Ontario Place, Minister, when they were led to believe there wouldn't be much at all taxpayer cost associated?
Thank you for the question. I'll pass it to Mr. Lindsay.
Good afternoon, everybody. First, I'd like to thank the Auditor General and her team for their hard work over the course of the past year with us at Infrastructure Ontario on both of the audits that are at topic today. To your question, in 2019, IO was directed by government to run a process with 4 objectives: finding an international set of bidders who were willing to give us proposals that would align with the government's vision, would represent financial benefits to taxpayers, had viable proposals at their heart, and ultimately with entities that had a track record of performance. We've continued to work with the Ministry of Infrastructure and government over the course of the last couple of years to ensure that each one of those objectives is met. As part of that, we've continued to refine what tenant landlord costs are and shall be for the investment that's going to happen at Ontario Place. And I just want to say that some of these categories of investment have always been the sorts of things that the Government of Ontario would need to invest in order to rehabilitate and bring Ontario Place back to life, regardless of what proposals ultimately prospered through a call for development process, like site servicing, replacing 60-year-old infrastructure down at Ontario Place, shoreline remediation, and more recently, some of the investments that the government is still contemplating making in the 50-acre green park, which is at the heart of this redevelopment of Ontario Place. So I would say, in answer to the question, we've continued to be prudent with the Government of Ontario to think about the investments that we as a landlord have to make in this property in order to bring it back to life and attract millions of visitors a year.
Since it's now been revealed that Science Centre will cost more to relocate than it would to fix up in its current location, will the government rethink those plans?
I don't agree with that characterization. So what's been reported today by the Auditor General is that we continue to work with the Ministry of Infrastructure on the cost of a new science centre down at Ontario Place. I think it's worth remembering what we're doing by doing that. We're creating a new state-of-the-art, bespoke, built-for-purpose Ontario Science Centre that's going to last for several generations. That's optimized in respect of exhibit space and is going to give incredible experiences to generations of kids. Those costs are not yet finalized. The figures that are in the Auditor General's report are preliminary. We continue to work with both the Science Centre and the Ministry of Infrastructure to figure out...
Okay, but the bottom line is it's going to be incredibly expensive regardless of the fact. Even if you were to rebuild it in the same location, moving it definitely will cost more. You have to rebuild the entire thing. It's just simple. I don't understand why he's got to play these kind of games.
What those final costs are going to be. But I would simply stress that, as we said at a press conference almost a year ago, the costs associated with rehabilitating and remediating the existing facility at 770 Don Mills have continued to increase as well, consistent with inflation and the things that we've been discovering about the condition of that facility, most notably its roof.
Mr. Lindsay, why was there so much involvement from Infrastructure Ontario in the call for development process? There was one VP, I'm not sure if that was yourself at the time or somebody else. There was one VP who was having direct conversations with some of the bidders. Why was that taking place when the rules explicitly stated that there was to be no communication with government or government officials?
And I appreciate the question. Look, it was not me. I was not yet in role at Infrastructure Ontario. But I want to say that I would repeat what the Auditor General said earlier today. She has found no evidence that there was any inappropriate contact between IO employees and our bidders. She has given us very good recommendations, which we've accepted, about making sure that in future, interactions between participants and responsible executives at Infrastructure Ontario always go through transaction advisors and others who we ultimately retain to help us with these processes. But what we've learned through this process is those interactions on behalf of IO employees with participants were on matters logistical and procedural and related to the responsibilities of parties. They did not bear in any way upon the evaluation of the proposals that came in, which was done by a core set of nonpartisan officials on a consensus scoring basis.
The auditor specifically said, though, that the process was not fair, transparent, or accountable. So how is the public supposed to have confidence in the process?
I'll let the Auditor General characterize it as she sees fit. I will simply tell you that Infrastructure Ontario was directed in 2019 to run a process that, by the AG's own admission earlier today, was not meant to be a structured procurement. It was meant to be a real estate solicitation. We wanted to take in ideas from across the globe and compare them on an apples to oranges basis to see which of these ideas best aligned with the government's vision and would have the best benefits to taxpayers. We did so, creating a process that was competitive, that had nonpartisan evaluation at its core, and that borrowed many of the best practices of what we at Infrastructure Ontario are known for in respect of running these processes. But flexibility was always a part of the process, and I would absolutely stand behind the notion that the recommendations that we made to government after evaluation were on the basis of conversation by nonpartisan evaluators.
Mr. Calandra, the MZO report, based on the findings, it really seems like before you took over the role, it was this rather haphazard process to determine the issuance of these. When you took over, you reviewed quite closely, I think it was roughly half of them. Based on the auditor's findings, are you going to now review more of these from before your tenure?
Yeah, no. When I came to the position, we put a number of them on. We reviewed some. I think I've revoked 3 and have put a number of them on a watch list to ascertain what progress has been made. And as I announced a couple of weeks ago, that was a process that it was an 18-month process, but I'm reducing that process down to a 12-month process. As I've looked at this, and we brought in the new framework, of course, the MZO framework in April of 2024, we want to ensure that the ultimate goal, which is to build more homes, jobs, and economic activity, is met. That's what the framework, the new framework, is really about. That was the goal right from the beginning, frankly. But look, I take what the Auditor General has suggested. I think we moved pretty quickly, even in advance of this report. Frankly, I think a vast majority of the recommendations we've already implemented with the new MZO framework. But as we said a couple of weeks ago, absolutely want to ensure that the ultimate goal is to get a shovel in the ground. Then we are going to ensure that any MZO that we approve has to be followed up by a shovel in the ground. If it's not, then I won't hesitate to revoke it.
One in particular that's highlighted as a case study in the report is, what's described about how it came to be is eerily similar to the Greenbelt report from last year, even involving some of the same individuals. I believe that's Ontario Regulation 160/2022. Do you have any desire to look at that specific MZO? Okay.
Look, we have reviewed every MZO. The department and myself, in some instances, have called mayors to see where they're at on some of these approved MZOs. But I know the department has gone back to every single one of those MZOs to ask, where are you? Is it something that you still would like to pursue? And how does it fit in with the new framework that we put in place last April? But ultimately, in the end, again, I'll reiterate this, and I can't say this more strongly. If we provide an MZO, it is my expectation that that results in a shovel in the ground. And if it does not result in a shovel in the ground, then I will not hesitate to revoke an MZO that is not being utilized for the purpose that it was given.
Mr. Jones, the auditor calculated about 1,600 opioid overdoses that were reversed at supervised consumption sites.
All right, question period should be starting any minute now. I'm just waiting for the CPAC site to get their shit together.
That as we see the number of individuals and families impacted by the opioid crisis, that we need to do more. And that is why we made that announcement at the Association of Municipalities of Ontario to say we want to transition into heart hubs. These are facilities that are actually going to provide more than just facilitating drug use. We want to make sure that there is a pathway out of addictions, and with our Heart Hub model, you will see social work, you will see healthcare, you will see pathways for addiction, mental health assistance, and of course supportive housing. And I have to say, since we made that announcement in August, we've seen a great deal of interest from our municipal partners, as well as community agencies that are coming together and making sure that it is not just about swapping out a dirty needle for a clean needle. It's about to provide that service, that hope that we can get people on the path to treatment.
We do know that that specific part, though, of supervised consumption does save lives. Why didn't the government do an impact assessment and look at how many people might die as a result of this decision?
Well, we did actually study the Riverdale site specifically after that horrific death of a mother. And, when you start to read that report and see how it impacts communities, how parents are literally not taking their children to their local playground because they're concerned about drug paraphernalia that they are finding in those playgrounds, we're acting. We want people to have a pathway out of addictions. And the way to do that is to ensure
Is by giving them a place to do it?
Organizations working together and ensuring that they have all access to service. It might
Because
be
that seems to
social
be
services
working
today,
well.
it
Go
might
look
be
at
supportive
Vancouver. It
housing,
seems to be
and
working
hopefully
great.
it is accessing mental health treatment and addictions recovery. Thank you.
A lot about the drug paraphernalia in public being a big reason behind this, but the report says that your ministry is aware that drug paraphernalia and drug use could increase in public if people don't have places to do it in private, like the safe consumption sites. So how do you explain that? It says that it's going to get worse.
Listen, I've spoken to store owners. I've spoken to restaurateurs. I've spoken to mall facilities who are literally finding drug paraphernalia in their washrooms, on their facilities. There is no doubt that we can do better, and we will do better with these 19 heart hubs. We are enabling and investing in a model that I believe will ultimately lead to people getting some hope and getting some pathways to treatment. Our investments in mental health and addictions are unparalleled. You know, when we see the number of new treatment beds that are available, we're almost at 400 new since 2018. When we see youth wellness hubs now opening in the province of Ontario, something that didn't exist prior to 2018 under the leadership of Premier Ford, we want people to have pathways out. And I will say again, swapping a dirty needle for a clean one is not a pathway out and does not give people hope. And that's what we need to provide.
I agree with that, but I mean, what are you guys doing about it?
You know, Ontario Place, all those decisions were not fair, transparent.
We're going back to Ontario Place again.
Those were kind of haphazard. And on the safe consumption sites, the move to hard hubs was done without proper planning. These are not flattering things to be said about a government that's seeking re-election. So, you know, opposition parties are saying this is you guys doing whatever the hell you want without listening to better advice or going to get expert advice. So how do you defend that?
Well, respectfully, you know, we are seeing that there is more opioid use in our communities. When we hear from police, I'm going to speak specifically to the issue that you highlighted. We are acting. We are putting investments. We are opening up applications to say, you want to transition out of that consumption site, we are giving you that opportunity. When the heart hubs are operationalized, it actually will amount to almost 3 times more funding. And that speaks to the fact that we want to make sure that there is a full service model for people, whether it's health, whether it's housing, whether it's social services, and whether it's treatment for mental health and addictions.
I understand that, but my overall question was these themes that the government does whatever it wants with MZOs, with Ontario Place, not listening to advice, not following proper procedures in policy development and whatnot. What do you say to that?
I say it speaks to our interest and our motivation to get things done. You know, we've had governments for decades study issues, and we need a government now, and you are seeing a government now that when emerging issues come forward, we are there to provide options and to act. And I can say, you know, we often talk about the speed of government and the ability to react quickly. What you are seeing with many of the issues, whether it is building and accessing more housing, whether it is a facility that unfortunately was deemed to be unsafe, whether it is a rise in opioid use, that you have a government that is acting and quickly implementing new policies.
Is it okay to bypass due process just because you want to get things done?
We have not bypassed due process. What we have done is ensured that we have a path forward and we are consulting with our stakeholders. There is no doubt that we have heard very clearly that neighborhoods, that families, that communities see the active drug use and they want a government to act. We have seen where we need more housing in the province of Ontario. You have a government that is reacting. Those are issues that as we respond to the stakeholders, as we respond to the families in Ontario, you have a government that is acting on these issues because we know the people of Ontario need and deserve that.
Minister, it's not a question of action or acting, it's a question of...
All right, question period has begun. Let's go. It only took much longer than I thought it would. Are they singing the national anthem right now?
Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Let the doors be open, que l'on ouvre les portes. Statements by members.
Emperor Greg says, open the doors.
Saanich, Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today and want to start by thanking my friend, the Member of Parliament for Medicine Hat, Karsten Warner, because it's rare that an SO31 so hits home that I decide I better put it on my social media page. The Honourable Member's SO31 dealt with one theme, and that was kindness. How can we be kinder to each other? I think in the last week we've seen some moments that we regret, some moments where things are said and postures are taken that suggest to Canadians that we're not people worth emulating, those they elect to represent them in this place. And I think sometimes which would affect us more, to think our mothers are watching or to know our children are watching. Words not said often enough in this place are, I was wrong, I'm sorry. My honourable friend, the Member of Parliament for Grand Prairie Mackenzie, brought me up short by telling me how some words I'd said in the media, carelessly. I completely agree with what the Member of Parliament for London Fanshawe said in her point of order, but I also told the same reporter I'd agreed with what the Member for Calgary Rocky Ridge had said. But it never gets reported exactly the way you say it, and I should know better. So I just wanted to share with all of you here, let's be kind, let's be loving, and let's enjoy a Christmas of peace.
The Honourable Member for Surrey Centre.
Mr. Speaker, this summer millions of Canadians cheered on Team Canada at the Olympic and Paralympic Games. Paralympic swimmer Sebastian Masabi smashed the world record and brought the gold home to Surrey. Canadian athletes give it their all to represent our country.
She sounded more sober than usual. Last time, I think it was yesterday, she sounded pretty drunk. Mr. Speaker, rising on the point of order.
To our athletes, I ask the Conservative colleagues to be honest with Team Canada today. Will you support Canadian athletes by voting for our plan, or will you continue to oppose them? Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Regina Leuven.
This is my favorite time of year, for two reasons. First, the Christmas spirit can be seen everywhere you look. And second, Regina hosts my favorite event. Every year at the end of November, Regina becomes a destination for everything agriculture. The 53rd Canadian Western Agribition was once again a resounding success. Folks from around the globe gathered to Regina to take in the world-class livestock shows, the trade shows, and the rodeo. This year featured 130 major events, including 4 nights of rodeo, the Indigenous Agriculture Summit, the Canadian Animal Ag Tech Awards, and the 25th year of the RBC Beef Supreme Champion. Agribition holds a special place in my heart because our family showed Holsteins there for 25 straight years. It is our family's winter holiday. The barns are where I learned many life lessons, some the hard way, and made many lifelong friends. I want to congratulate CEO Sean Kindop and his whole team on once again hosting a world-class event and bringing agriculture to the world and displaying proudly what we do in the ag sector.
The honourable member for Bonavista, Buren, Trinity.
Mr. Speaker, there's a Grinch impersonation contest. Time, right now. Location, the Conservative benches. Mr. Speaker, our government is giving a tax break to all Canadians by exempting essentials like groceries, restaurant meals, children's clothing, and gifts from the GST. This includes snacks, sandwiches, and other prepared foods as well as beer and wine. The Conservatives pretend they want lower taxes, but when push comes to shove, they vote against tax exemptions for Canadians. They want family essentials such as car seats, diapers, and children's toys to be more expensive, Mr. Speaker. Talk about a heart is...
Your fake tax cut isn't fooling anybody, Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Speaker, starting December 14th, these items will be tax-free and Canadians will be able to keep more of their money in their pockets.
The Honourable Member for Rivière-des-Mille. Mr. Speaker, retired officers Leanne Quinn and Hélène Solaire found unforgivable errors on two statues that honour Canadian soldiers who died in battle near the military base in Trenton. The bronze work entitled Presence in Absence is meant to honour 67 soldiers for their ultimate sacrifice. But, surprise, surprise, the two veterans found their names there. And these are not the only errors on this statue. Out of 67 soldiers who are identified, only 20 made the ultimate sacrifice. 12 are still alive, and 4 have never served in the military. But no one noticed this at the inauguration in 2022. In fact, neither the living dead in question nor their families were invited. What a lack of respect to everyone who has lost their lives serving Canada. The Minister owes the veterans explanations and especially apologies. Visibly, after this fiasco and that of the Afghanistan commemorative statue, it is clear that Ottawa is monumentally incompetent.
The honourable member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, December 3rd, was the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. People with disabilities are the largest minority group within Canada and worldwide, and the only minority group that anyone can become a member of at any time. This group faces stigma, discrimination, and barriers to basic rights and services. They are more likely to experience poverty and are disproportionately impacted by climate, disasters, conflict, and an increasing cost of living. It's important their voices are included in all conversations. More than 1 in 4 Canadians have one or more disabilities, Mr. Speaker, with mental health-related disabilities the most prominent among youth. Our government has been working to support Canadians with disabilities through the development of a Canada Disability Benefit, the Autism National Framework, and funding for mental health service delivery. I am grateful to community groups in my riding, such as CMHA York Service, York Simcoe, Community Living Central York, Lighthouse Learning Centre in Carey's Place, and the Child Disability Network of Canada, who advocate and work to support people living with disabilities. I'd also like to mention Voices of Joy, a choir for people of all abilities who gave a wonderful holiday concert. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
Grief, an emotion I never truly understood until this year. Grief does not change you, it reveals you. You will become someone it would have been impossible for you to be, and in this way, your loved one lives on in you. Everyone loves, and everyone has loss. Grief is universal, a sacred process, yet it is so unique. We all cope differently. You will not get over the loss of a loved one. You will learn to courageously adapt. This is my first Christmas without my dad. I know he would want us to make the turtles, sing Silent Night, put the lights up outside, and decorate the tree with ornaments that represent our collective memories, losses, prayers, hopes, and holiday wishes. This Christmas season, reach out to those who need a hug. Let them know you care. Speak the names of those you have lost and know that their memories will never fade away as long as we refuse to let them. Grief is not a sign of weakness, nor a lack of faith. It's the price of love.
Excellent.
The honourable member for Vancouver-Granville.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in the House today to honour 3 extraordinary Paralympians from my riding of Vancouver-Granville: Nathan Clement, Peter Isherwood, and Julia Haynes. In particular, I'd like to highlight Nathan Clement, because this summer Nathan took home the silver medal from the Paris Paralympic Games, the men's T1 individual road time trial. He was also a swimmer at the Rio Paralympics and holds the Canadian record in the 50-meter butterfly. Meeting Nathan was an incredible reminder of his dedication and commitment to competition and community, which has inspired so many of us. Through my own work, Mr. Speaker, I have seen the privilege of experiencing firsthand the power of sports and bringing us together, but these Paralympians are absolutely something else, and it is such a privilege to be able to rise in this House and on behalf of all of us, congratulate not just Nathan, Julia, and Peter, but every single Paralympian who has made us so very proud. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Milton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Team Canada is in the House of Commons today. Our best athletes, Olympians and Paralympians from across the country are here so that we can all congratulate them on their success and thank them for representing Canada so well. From Milton, we've got Michael Foley, who's a track cyclist, and Kayla Alexander, who's an amazing basketball player. But Mr. Speaker, I was one of these athletes 8 years ago. I walked out onto this carpet and imagined what my next steps would be, and here I am. I'm really proud to be part of a government that supports our athletes. We've invested an incremental $80 million into the Community Sport for All program, and we're the first and only government to increase the athlete assistance program 2 times. So all of these athletes here will be celebrating better affordability when it comes to their day-to-day. Mr. Speaker, the Olympians and Paralympians from Canada are the best of us. They are our best ambassadors, they're our greatest role models, and I'm proud to be part of a government that supports each and every one of them from the playground all the way to the podium. Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Toronto St. Paul's.
Mr. Speaker, the carbon tax is draining the pockets of Canadians and has failed to meet a single emissions target. Anyone can see that this is a failed policy. Even Ontario Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie. She said in a speech last night, and I quote, "I'm not here to tell the Prime Minister how to do his job, but I promise you, I will tell him when he is wrong, like on the carbon tax," end quote. And Mr. Speaker, I completely agree.
Oh, maybe we should start telling him how to do his job, because he's doing a really poor job at his job.
It's wrong to drive up the cost of living. It's wrong to vandalize our economy. Crombie's statement is not only a political critique, it's a recognition that everyday Canadians struggle in so many ways. People shouldn't have to choose between feeding their families and heating their homes this winter. Yet, in the new year, the NDP Liberal government will hike the carbon tax yet again. When will this Prime Minister give Canadians real and lasting relief and realize that the carbon tax is flat out wrong?
Probably never. It's called an election. We need it now.
L'honorable député.
The honourable member for St. Laurent. Mr. Speaker, this past summer, millions of Canadians cheered on Team Canada at the Olympic and Paralympic Games in Paris. And I'd like to commend all of them, including Sophia Ferry, a Paralympic basketball player, who has showed the perseverance and devotion necessary to succeed. The path from playground to podium is long and arduous, and our athletes have to train for years. The Liberal government is proud to support over 1,900 athletes as part of the Athlete Assistance Program, and it is also proud to enhance this program in order to provide more funding to more athletes. The additional $7 million per year will increase the living allowance by 23% and the Paralympic athlete allowance by 30%. Unfortunately, the Conservatives are blocking these funds and preventing these payments to athletes. They should allow Parliament to get back to work so we can invest in our athletes. Thank you.
If I could ask honourable members to please keep their voices down. Je vais demander aux députés, s'il vous plaît, de
Oh, we're starting off early, huh, Greg?
déclaration des députés. The honourable member from Medicine Hat, Cardston Warner.
Mr. Speaker, on Sunday, an Oakville man with a lengthy criminal record was arrested and charged with a violent home invasion, prompting the Halton police chief to tweet, and I quote, "Yet another violent offender already out on similar and violent charges with court conditions. Is anyone surprised that some of these violent offenders reoffend? Over and over and over again, our citizens deserve better. This offender needs to remain in custody to keep others safe." End of quote. Again and again and again, Mr. Speaker, law enforcement across this nation are expressing the dire need to fix Canada's broken bail system. However, the Liberals are ignoring their concerns and are completely out of touch when it comes to community safety. The Liberals' soft on crime policies, like their catch and release bail failures, have led to a 50% increase in violent crime across Canada. Canadians deserve to be safe in their communities, and police deserve to be heard. Enough is enough. It's time for the NDP Liberals to get out of the way so Conservatives can stop the crime and prioritize public safety.
There you go. Excellent. The honourable member for Haldimand Norfolk.
Mr. Speaker, there's only one person keeping this Liberal government in power, and that's the NDP leader. He has repeatedly chosen to prop up the Liberals, aid their corruption, and facilitate the economic misery of Canadians caused by 9 years of this Liberal Prime Minister. The NDP leader broke his promise to vote non-confidence in the Liberal government. In his own words, the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for the people, end quote. The NDP leader continues to support the Liberals even though they have doubled housing costs, tripled the carbon tax, and sent millions of Canadians to the food bank. Why won't the NDP leader stand by his words, vote no confidence in this government, so that we can have a carbon tax election?
Because he wants that pension.
The Honourable Member for Laval-les-Îles. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to talk about a very special paradox of Canadian politics. For years, the Conservative leader and his party have lectured Canadians on the virtues of reducing taxes. And yet, when this government slashes the GST in order to put more money in the pockets of Canadians, what do? They vote against it. It's as if a chef refused to eat his own cooking. The leader of the opposition claims to be the champion of affordability, but when he has the opportunity to support real, concrete assistance for Canadians, he refuses to do so. Mr. Speaker, this is not about politics, it's about priorities, and it is clear that the Conservatives' priorities are just as lost as their sense of irony. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député d'Algoma.
The honourable member for Algoma, Manitoulin, Kapuskasing.
Mr. Speaker, Juanita Bigwans, also known as Winnie, a 30-year-old First Nation woman from Chaging First Nation, has been missing since October 2nd. Her family, friends, and the police fear she may have been taken by drug or human traffickers or worse. Last year, I stood in this House to decry the lack of resources provided to Indigenous policing. UCCM Anishinaabe Police are doing all they can, but they need dedicated crime units to deal with increased human and drug trafficking. Juanita's case is a tragic reminder of the ongoing crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. We must immediately recognize First Nations police as essential services and fund them at a level that is equitable with all other non-Indigenous police services. We must provide Indigenous people with the resources and the development of a national missing Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit, and gender-diverse people database that can be shared throughout Canada via a downloadable app. And we must ensure that the Red Dress Alert is launched nationally. No more missing sisters, Mr. Speaker.
Downloadable app. Oh no, it's another scandal incoming. Another downloadable app. Here we go.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Today I would like to pay tribute to Ms. Lucille Riendeau-Houle, who is a writer and genealogist from my community. She raised her children, and then Ms. Riendeau-Houle decided to write her story, not through her own past, but through those of her ancestors. With great talent, she published 7 books presenting the Riendeau-Riendeau-Hubert-Lesage families. This look into our past allows us to discover how our original ancestors lived. Her books are sold in the United States and in Europe, and they brought her the Medal of the Quebec Lieutenant Governor in 2022 for her contribution to our genealogy and her community involvement with I Write My Life and the Anna LaBerge Foundation. Ms. Riendeau-Houle is 82 and fighting cancer, but she still writes every single day to celebrate the memory of those who went before us. On behalf of the Bloc Québécois, I would like to pay tribute to her contribution to transmitting the history of Quebec. Thank you, Ms. Riendeau-Houle.
The Honourable Member for Brantford-Brant.
Mr. Speaker, the sellout NDP leader has once again betrayed Canadians by siding with the Liberals to prop up this failing government, all to secure his $2.2 million pension. He's going to reject a motion of non-confidence in this government based entirely on his own words, and I quote, "The Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people," end of quote. Yet it's his party who keeps the Prime Minister in power through their carbon tax coalition. Under this deal, housing costs have skyrocketed, rent, mortgage payments, and down payments have doubled. The sellout leader has voted in favor of the carbon tax over 24 times and plans to quadruple it, driving up costs for gas, groceries, and heating. Food bank use at an all-time high, with 1 million Ontarians relying on food banks. Canadians deserve leaders who will fight for them, not a coalition of self-interest and betrayal. It's time to end the deal of failure, put Canadians first. It's time for a carbon tax coalition.
It's time for a carbon tax coalition. Wait, what?
The Honourable Member for Humber River Black Creek.
Mr. Speaker, Canada's security is everyone's concern. This week, there have been more alarming reports of foreign interference in the Conservative leadership race. Yet the leader
only the Conservatives. Only the Conservatives. Okay, well then name them.
To obtain the necessary
Name them, Judy.
Security clearance to access
going on to Pierre with the security clearance. Okay, while she's babbling about that, I found this kind of funny article here. Mexico troops seize a record fentanyl haul days after Trump threatened tariffs. So what, the Mexican cartels just raided themselves? Holy shit, this is actually funny. I thought that was quite funny.
Oral questions. Questions orales.
Yay!
The opposition.
This Prime Minister is weak, and he has lost control. He has lost control of the border, of immigration, and of spending. And now he has lost control of his own party. The Ontario Premier is against these tax hikes. The leader of the Ontario Liberal Party, so is the Liberal Premier of Nova Scotia against these attacks on natural resources. And dozens of Liberal MPs want to fire this Prime Minister. How can he still be hanging on to power? He's lost control. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, our caucus is unified when it comes to delivering for Canadians with a tax holiday for all Canadians over the coming months. Although several Conservatives wanted to vote for that tax holiday, but it was blocked by their leader. He's gagging the members of his own caucus and preventing them from representing their constituents here in Ottawa. And instead, he's asking them to represent him in their ridings. That's not how it works, Mr. Speaker. And on this side of the House, we will always stand up for Canadians. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister cannot stand up because he's lost control. I already said that he's lost control of our borders, of immigration. He's lost control of these inflationary deficits that have doubled the national debt, the cost of housing, and the number of people who need to go to food banks. But he promised that he would cap the deficit at $40 billion. Next week, in the economic statement, will the Prime Minister respect that promise? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, in due course, we will present the economic statement, and the Conservative Party will likely vote against it, because in it there will be initiatives to help Canadians during this difficult time. There will be investment in economic growth, throughout the country, and yet the Conservative leader doesn't want to do anything that might help Canadians. He prefers to spend all his energy on jostling for his own political interests, which means he's not helping Canadians when they need help. That's why he voted against the tax break and against dental care and against Canadians.
This week, Prime Minister has lost control of everything. He's lost control of the borders, lost control of immigration, lost control of spending, and now has lost control of his cabinet and party. In fact, his foreign minister is now announcing her leadership campaign in the New York Times. The Liberal leader of the province of Ontario has announced she's against his quadrupling carbon tax. The Liberal Premier of Newfoundland is against his job-killing energy cap, and 20 of his MPs want to fire him. How is it that he clings to power when he's lost control?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
We can all see that the Leader of the Opposition has trouble with the ideas that individuals might have different perspectives, and that might be a good thing for a robust political party like the Liberal Party of Canada and all its partners across the country. The Leader of the Opposition refuses to let his backbenchers or any of his team members have any opinions at all. Indeed, he sanctioned them and wrote a letter in their name decrying their advocacy for their own citizens in their communities when it came to delivering money for mayors for housing from coast to coast to coast. He stands for muzzling his MPs. We stand for diversity.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Diversity of opinions, I guess that means the opinion that he should not be Prime Minister. That's the predominant opinion among Liberals across the country. On the front page of the New York Times, you'd think the Foreign Minister would be fighting Trump's tariffs. Instead, she's fighting for her boss's job, where she's described in the headline as a possible successor after she sat down for a photo shoot and made the case. This on top of a Liberal leader in Ontario who's against his quadrupling carbon tax, a Liberal Premier in Newfoundland who opposes his job-killing energy cap. Why won't the Prime Minister get the point? His party doesn't want him anymore.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Let's talk, Mr. Speaker, about standing up for Canada. One of the things we've seen throughout our history, when Canada is threatened, when it's challenged with a crisis, when people want ill of Canadians, Canadians pull together across partisan stripes, across backgrounds, across the country to stand up for our neighbours, to stand up for Canadians. That's certainly what we were able to do as a country 8 years ago. Unfortunately, this basic Canadian attribute seems unavailable to that Leader of the Opposition who can't help himself on playing politics with Canadians' well-being.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, this from a Prime Minister who is helping Donald Trump take away our jobs. You can just imagine the President in the Oval Office calling our businesses to say, hey, I saw that you have a quadrupling carbon tax north of the border. Why not come south of the border where there's no carbon tax and other taxes are falling? How about the latest electricity tax the Prime Minister is bringing in that will drive factories south of the border, or his energy cap that will drive away our resource companies? I understand why President Trump wants to take Canadian jobs, but why is this Prime Minister trying to help him do it?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The problem for the Leader of the Opposition is Canadians increasingly see through his shallow partisan games. If he actually cared about helping Canadians and cutting taxes, he wouldn't have voted against taking off the sales tax for Canadians for the next few months.
Right.
But he wants Canadians to continue to struggle because it benefits him politically, perhaps, instead of actually being there to solve the challenges Canadians are facing. That's why he voted against dental care for seniors. That's why he voted against a school food program. That's why he's voting against a sales tax break for Canadians for the next few months. That's not on, Mr. Speaker.
You notice how he said it benefits him politically, perhaps? As in, like, he's just spewing shit and he doesn't even know. He has no idea how it benefits him.
The Quebec National Assembly unanimously adopted a motion to ask the federal government to put an end to the religious exception for hate speech. Now, everyone here has also, at one time or another, voted for the end of this religious exception. And that makes sense because it is just and necessary to get rid of that exception. Will the Prime Minister move forward now and get rid of this religious exception to incitation to hate and violence? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, if the Bloc Québécois really wanted to do something about incitement to hate crimes, he would be doing something about this conservative filibuster in this House so that we can finally debate the Bloc Québécois bill that he's talking about, so that we can debate our bill for protecting children online. There are a number of measures that we would be happy to debate so that we can help Canadians, so that we can reduce hate speech. But unfortunately, the Bloc Québécois is not putting an end to this conservative filibuster.
L'honorable député de Belleuil-Chambly.
Mais c'était limpide.
The honourable member. Well, that was very clear, Mr. Speaker. But we know that we know that 66% of Canadians and 75% of Quebecers want to put an end to this religious exception. Will the government remove 2 sections of the Criminal Code? Will the Prime Minister put his money where his mouth is? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I would be so happy if we were here in this House discussing these important issues. Too many Canadians are facing hate and discrimination these days. And we want this Parliament to be able to debate the problem and bring forward legislation to fix the problem. But unfortunately, the Conservatives are continuing to block the work of this House, and the Bloc Québécois is not doing anything about it.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
The Conservatives showed us who they really are. They voted against tax relief for the working class. And the Liberals want to jack up taxes on the 15th. New Democrats believe the working class needs permanent relief. So will the Prime Minister permanently exempt the GST off of daily essentials like a kid's winter jacket?
You hear this fucking guy? Come on, Jagmeet.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we're actually moving forward to suspend the sales tax for Canadians so that they can afford the basic necessities that they will need, whether it's fresh-made produce whether it's fresh-made products at the groceries, whether it's dinner at a restaurant or even a fast food place for the family. These are things that Canadians will find less expensive over the coming months. Unfortunately, the Conservatives continue to vote against measures that will help Canadians. They stand against this tax break for all Canadians, like they stand against dental care, school food programs, and many other things to help Canadians.
L'honorable député de Burnaby Sud.
Why were the Conservatives chirping? They proved that bootlickers are billionaires.
Families will still need to eat after February 15th. But the GST will be going back up on February 15th.
Uh-oh.
Order! I'm having great difficulty hearing the honourable member from Burnaby South. The honourable member from Burnaby South.
Why are these conservatives chirping so much? They've proven that they are bootlickers for billionaires.
Oh, he was happy he got to say that one twice.
February 15th, but that day, the Prime Minister will once again increase the GST. Just another Liberal letdown. Why does the Prime Minister think that people should have to keep paying GST on children's clothes and diapers? Why?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, our tax break over the next few months will help families throughout the country. It will help them with what they need to buy at the grocery store because groceries, restaurant visits, wine and beer, all sorts of things that we'll be spending on over the next few months, all of these things will be cheaper, tax-free. That's our way of telling Canadians that we see that they're struggling, but we are here to invest and help them. Unlike the Conservatives, who have voted against assistance to Canadians, against the tax break, and against dental care.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister claims he's taking taxes off of fresh-made produce. He really does. He really does think that food comes from the grocery store, not from the farmers who actually grow the produce. That's why he, I guess, thinks he can carbon tax those farmers without taxing the food. And then you have his friend, the Maserati Marxist over there in the. They're both out of touch. Canadians are out of money. How about a carbon tax election?
Whoa!
Colleagues, order.
Oh, that's gonna get him in trouble. Darth Fungus is not happy.
Order. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition had the opportunity to axe the sales tax for Canadians, and he voted against it and forced his MPs to do exactly the same. He is only interested in his own political self-interest, not interested in helping Canadians, either with a tax break for the next few months, or with dental care for vulnerable seniors across the country, or with more school food programs that'll help kids and parents afford their groceries. These are the kinds of things we're doing. These are exactly the things that he is blocking.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister says he's going to leave the economy to bankers. He says he doesn't think much about monetary policy, the budgets balance themselves, and that he's not very good with numbers, but he did get one thing right. He said that deficits cause inflation. So did his finance minister right before she introduced his budget, saying no deficit above $40 billion. So, straight up question, will the Prime Minister keep his word and cap the inflationary deficit below $40 billion?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I know the Leader of the Opposition is eager for our fall economic statement. If he really wants to see it, he could perhaps stop the obstruction of Parliament to allow us to move forward on dealing with Canadians and challenges that they are facing. But it's interesting that he brought up inflation once again. He stopped talking about inflation after years of railing about it because we did the work to actually bring it down, Mr. Speaker. We invested in programs that were there to support Canadians, but that didn't contribute to inflation. Inflation is now back down in the target range. Interest rates are coming down. That's why we can give a tax break to Canadians. That's why.
I'm going to ask colleagues to please not take the floor unless recognized by the Speaker so that we can both hear and that people who do use translation can hear the answers to the questions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker, inflation is rising. after the inflationary spending of this Prime Minister. In fact, all 4 measures of inflation are higher than the Bank of Canada's target rate. And this Prime Minister's electioneering and inflationary spending will make it harder for the Bank of Canada to reduce interest rates. Interest rates on Canadians who are already struggling to pay for food and housing. Once again, this Prime Minister said he would cap his inflationary deficits at $40 billion. Will he do that? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, over the last few years, we have invested in measures to help Canadians who are struggling, whether it be dental care, whether it be more child care spaces, whether it be school food programs. These investments were all made to help Canadians. But despite these programs, inflation is nonetheless back within the Bank of Canada's target range. Now, we are bringing forward a tax break for all Canadians. But the Conservative Party is voting against that because they only care about partisanship.
The results are in on the Prime Minister's radical liberalization of hard drugs. He teamed up with the BC NDP to decriminalize fentanyl, crack, and heroin. He lowered jail sentences for mass producers of deadly fentanyl. And 80% of the fentanyl made in Canada is done so using ingredients that are not even regulated, but come right into our country where they're cooked into that poison, now threatening our trade relationship with the U.S. Will he reverse his radical liberal drug agenda to save lives and jobs?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I don't know why it matters if the stuff is regulated or not. It's gonna kill people regardless of the fact. It should be banned across the board.
With the toxic drug epidemic is to stand for photo ops in front of encampments and try to use them for cheap votes. Exploiting Canadians is not the way to move forward. We've anchored ourselves in science, in working in partnership with municipalities, with frontline workers, with provinces, working with the United States on precursor chemicals, working to invest in supports, wraparound supports, including housing for people suffering from homelessness and the drug crisis. We will continue to be there for people.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The results are in. His radical liberalization of hard drugs has led to a 200% increase in overdose deaths. 47,000 people have died. The worst deaths have been in NDP-controlled BC, where the liberalization has been the most extreme. Worse, he's allowing 80% of the precursor chemicals used to make fentanyl come in unregulated and legally over our border to be used by criminals who get out because he softened the sentences. Now our trade relationship is threatened over it. Will he reverse this disastrous experiment to save the jobs and the lives of Canadians?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what has become increasingly clear through the Leader of the Opposition's little performances is he doesn't actually care about Canadians and about people suffering. He is there for a clip, he's there for a photo op, but he's not there to do the work of delivering based on science, based on compassion, based on a public health approach on dealing with the toxic drug epidemic.
He's there for a photo op, so the Prime Minister will attend and deliver remarks for the Team Canada celebration for the Olympics. Notes for media. Open coverage. Media interested in participating can contact. You want to talk about photo ops, Trudeau?
Responsible is allowing 80% of the chemicals used in fentanyl manufacturing to come in.
That was his itinerary for today, by the way. Trudeau's itinerary.
Crack, heroin, and fentanyl, and then after you see that it leads to a massive increase in deaths, then 2 weeks ago, he, the Bloc, and the NDP all voted in favor of a committee report to decriminalize fentanyl right across the country at a time when Canadians are dying and our border could be closed. Will the Prime Minister confirm that he has reversed himself and now opposes decriminalization of fentanyl?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, we see the priority of the Leader of the Opposition is to exploit and use Canadians who are suffering to score cheap political points. Meanwhile, we do the serious work amongst parliamentarians across different orders of government with partners around the world to address this in a way that is grounded in science, not ideology, that works with frontline workers, makes investments in wraparound services, and puts everything forward to try and save lives as best we possibly can. That's what Canadians deserve, not the kind of cheap partisanship that this Leader of the Opposition continues to demonstrate every time he stands up in this House. It is absolutely irresponsible.
You're irresponsible. The past 10 years have been irresponsible.
Mr. Speaker, I feel the Prime Minister doesn't understand how serious this situation is. The National Assembly of Quebec voted unanimously for an end to the religious exception, and the Jewish community in Quebec and Canada is afraid. Due to the federal government's lack of action, people can openly incite to violence against the Jewish community. So if the Prime Minister shows that he's serious, we will also be serious. If he says that he's willing to do something about this, we will unblock Parliament for 24 hours. Order, please. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we see that the Bloc Québécois is open to doing something here, but we would like to see that kind of readiness when it comes to other initiatives. For example, improving the healthcare system for the most vulnerable, which is blocked due to Conservative filibustering. Same thing for dental care, also blocked by the Conservatives. Or we would like them to help us be able to work on our online harms bill, C-63, which would protect people throughout the country, especially children. We would like to be able to debate all these things in Parliament, but unfortunately, the Bloc Québécois is continuing to let the Conservatives to make it all grind to a halt. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, I don't think the Prime Minister liked my idea. It's a matter of leadership. It's a matter of courage. It's a matter of consistency. We have courage. I'm simply proposing the same thing as the Prime Minister already did for the GST break. We're proposing the same thing.
She's literally
to protect the
falling
Jewish community.
asleep.
We will unblock
She is
Parliament.
literally
We will
passing out
pass
in her
this.
seat.
We will feel good about what we've accomplished, and then who knows if the government has other good
She's
ideas.
not
that don't
even
interfere with
there.
Quebec, who knows?
She's not even mentally there.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Oh my God, that was funny.
Mr. Speaker, we always come back to this matter of so-called interference with Quebec. The Bloc Québécois thinks that an initiative that would help seniors go to the dentist involves trampling on Quebec's jurisdiction. We are here to help seniors throughout the country, including in Quebec. We are here to improve old age security for seniors over 75. We are here to invest for those who need it most. And unfortunately, even when we created childcare spots throughout the country, the Bloc Québécois only wanted to talk about interfering with Quebec. We're here for all Canadians, including Quebecers.
This week, Prime Minister has lost the control of the cost of housing, which has doubled since he became Prime Minister. And just this week, the OECD published a report showing that Toronto and Vancouver are now the two most expensive housing markets in all of North America. Vancouver's housing is significantly more expensive than Seattle, even though Vancouverites make half as much money. Toronto's housing is more expensive than New York, even though New Yorkers make 50% more. Will the Prime Minister call a housing tax election so that we can bring it home?
Hear, hear. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
No, Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader has been having a rough few weeks since he promised he would be shutting down housing projects across the country. Even his Conservative MPs have been going around behind his back complaining to the CBC that they can no longer advocate for their communities, complain that they're no longer allowed to stand up for their mayors who need investments in housing in their communities. He prefers to muzzle his MPs than allow them to be their voice in their communities. His commitment to cut billions of dollars of investments from housing will not.
These are the same argument points that Pierre made to Trudeau a couple weeks ago when he had that caucus meeting and accused him of muting his entire party and MPs.
But I digress. The Prime Minister says that if he gives more money to local bureaucracies, they'll speed up home building. So he gave $500 million to Toronto City Hall. What happened? Home building slowed down by 40%. He gave Vancouver City Hall $115 million. And housing construction slowed down 15%. Gave $176 million to Ottawa City Hall. Construction down 22%. When will he learn that what we need in this country is to build homes, not bureaucracy?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, mayors across the country, including in Conservative-held ridings, are speaking out about the reckless cuts the Conservative leader is proposing to money that municipalities need to increase densification, to accelerate permitting, to move forward on home building faster and faster across this country. The Conservative leader is standing against what his own MPs are asking for when he's telling mayors across the country he's going to pull billions of dollars away of investments in housing that will respond to Canadians' needs to be able to grow the economy and live securely for the future.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
So he gives tax dollars to big city politicians, and then he gives tax dollars to CBC to interview those big city politicians to say that they like getting the money. Well, Mr. Speaker, if giving more money to big city politicians were going to solve the problem, we'd have the most affordable housing in the world. After revenues for cities has grown twice as fast as inflation and population combined for 2 decades in a row. We don't need more money for bureaucracy and politicians. We need money in the pockets of home buyers and home builders. So why not my common sense plan to axe the sales tax, GST, and bring down housing costs by 50 grand?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we're seeing the clear pattern of the Conservative leader. He picks fights with journalists, he picks fights with mayors and city councils, he even picks fights with the Team Canada approach that is standing up for Canada's interests, faced with real challenges from the incoming administration to our south. He is choosing to pick fights.
Why is there an infant screaming in the House of Commons?
Together to solve the challenges of housing, solve the challenges brought in by the new American administration. These are moments for us to pull together. Unfortunately, that's something of which this Conservative leader seems incapable.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Hiking taxes, debt, and inflation to pay off politicians in exchange for press releases and photo ops will not solve the problem. What it has done is doubled housing costs and made Toronto and Vancouver the most expensive housing markets in North America, worse than New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and many other places with more people and money and much less land. So here's a choice. He's afraid of a carbon tax election. Why don't we have a different kind? Why don't we have a housing tax election where he proposes to give money to politicians, I propose to put it in the pockets of home buyers?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, if he really wanted to put money in the pockets of Canadians, he wouldn't have voted against the Canada Child Benefit. He wouldn't have voted against our initiatives to cut taxes for Canadians over the next 2 months. He wouldn't have voted against initiatives like the Canada Carbon Rebate that puts more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadian families across the country as we fight climate change and reduce emissions. He continues to seek to divide and pick fights amongst Canadians, while we are offering solutions that both support Canadians now and build a stronger and more prosperous economy into the future. That's what we're going to keep doing, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member.
Right now, does he truly believe we have a strong and prosperous economy?
The Liberal government has let grocery prices soar to pad the pockets of CEOs. Canadians are paying far more.
What a wacko.
Ontario food banks are cutting back. The surge in demand has surpassed the capacity and resources. Liberals have let people down. Worse, Conservatives won't fix it. They will cut and make life harder for the working class. Why are the Liberals leaning on food banks to fix the affordability crisis they created?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I remember a time when the NDP stood up for workers across this country. But when we put forward a proposal to send a $250 check to working Canadians right across the country, to anyone who worked last year and made less than $150,000, they stood against it. They said no, they won't support being there for working Canadians. Of course, we will continue to look at doing more for seniors and more for young people, but recognizing hardworking Canadians who stepped up and got us through the pandemic, got us through this inflation crisis, turning their backs on workers like the Conservatives are, is really a shame to see from the NDP.
Well, Trudeau doesn't do any math because he doesn't think about monetary policies.
Member from Hamilton Centre, please, to not take the floor when not...
The budget will balance itself, ladies and gentlemen.
The honourable member for Nunavut.
The Chiefs of Ontario are calling for improved accountability of the non-insured health benefits program and access to mental health services. First Nations and Inuit are not consulted or invited to participate when selecting cultural support providers for their communities. As a result, unqualified people with criminal records are enrolled as service providers. When will the Liberals meaningfully work with First Nations and Inuit to improve accountability and access to appropriate mental health services?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
For your question, her question, Mr. Speaker. The reality is the AFN chiefs are right now engaged in a review of the entire program. We will continue to work with Indigenous leadership across this country to make sure we are fulfilling our responsibilities, to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to be healthy, everyone gets the services and supports that they need. We know this is part of the long journey of reconciliation that we have embarked upon as a country. We will continue to be there as a full partner in this and all other difficult discussions.
There we go.
He kind of does seem a bit more jittery than normal.
The honourable member for Davenport.
Mr. Speaker, recent reporting about India's alleged interference in the Conservative Party leadership race is concerning Canadians across the country, including my constituents in Davenport. All members of this House have a responsibility to take national security seriously. That is especially true of our party leaders, including the leader of the opposition who refuses to get a security clearance. Can the Prime Minister explain the efforts to protect our national security against foreign interference?
Bravo. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Yeah, list the people that are involved and get them out.
Allegations of Indian foreign interference in Conservative leadership races are alarming, but they're not new. They were highlighted in the NSICOP report. They were highlighted by the public inquiry into foreign interference. Yet, the Conservative leader refuses to get the top secret clearance necessary so he can be fully briefed up on threats to his party, to his colleagues, and to our democracy. It is inexplicable to the vast number of Canadians why he refuses to take the top secret briefings that would keep Canada.
It's not the first time, and members know that I've asked this question of various members in the House. I'll ask the honourable member from Edmonton West, as well as the member from St. Albert, Edmonton, to please not take the floor unless requested by the chair.
Thank you, Emperor Greg.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Hey, yes, the Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This Prime Minister has lost control, but he's clinging to power with the help of his NDP Liberal leader coalition partner, who said, I'm going to quote the NDP leader here, he said the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. He bemoaned the fact that the Teamsters and the ILWU were forced back to work, violating their right to strike. How can this Prime Minister cling to power with the help of someone who says he's too weak and too greedy to govern?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader has spent the last few months in this House trying to demonstrate that Parliament can't work for Canadians. He's been obstructing debate. He's been obstructing our ability to move forward on delivering for Canadians. And indeed, every chance he gets, he votes against measures that would support Canadians, whether it's the tax break that we're giving over the next few months, whether it's moving forward on dental, on a school food program, on more spots in lower price childcare. These are things he's voting against hands because he just wants Canadians to believe that everything is broken. Well, it's not, Mr. Speaker. We're continuing to believe in Canadians and build a stronger future together.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, Canadians want to fire that costly Prime Minister. His MPs want to fire that costly Prime Minister. The only one keeping him in power is the NDP leader, who again says the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. Oh, and now they're complaining that Canadians might choose me if there were an election. That's not their choice. It's not my choice. It's not any of their choices. That's the decision of the Canadian people. So why doesn't he turn the decision over to the people who run this country, Canadians, in a carbon tax election?
Send his ass home. Fire Trudeau.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Once again, the Conservative...
Again, ask honourable members not to take the floor. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, the Conservative leader demonstrates that he's trying very, very hard to prevent anything from being delivered for Canadians, whether it was dental care, whether it's the tax break that Canadians are getting off the sales tax for the next few months, whether it's initiatives around childcare or a school food program. He has stood up time and time in this House again and again to vote against measures that directly support Canadians, that grow the economy, that help people out, because his political argument relies on people being broken, Canadians being divided, people being angry. That's not the way we're going to...
I don't know, you've caused a lot of that division, Trudeau.
Everything he broke, Mr. Speaker, as my great finance critic said. And, you know, let's start with the carbon tax. The Indian Resource Council announced today they will be presenting a resolution at the Assembly of First Nations Special Chiefs Assembly to take the Liberal NDP Prime Minister's carbon tax to court. They say, we will not stand by where our communities are pushed further into poverty by the tax we never agreed to. And they want to dispel any notion that lower-income First Nations are better off with the carbon tax rebate. Mr. Speaker, why won't he listen to courageous First Nations people and have a carbon tax election?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Indigenous people have been the first and have for the longest stood up to highlight the dangers of climate change, the impact of neglecting our environment, of not protecting our lands and our oceans, particularly against the previous Conservative government of which that member was a part. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, the Canada carbon rebate puts more money back in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians right across the country. We will continue to fight climate change by putting more money in their pockets, despite the attempts of the Leader of the Opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He's talking down to First Nations people again. They said that they've done the research, and I quote, they want to dispel any notion that lower-income First Nations are better off with the carbon tax rebate. In rural and remote communities where First Nations live, the tax drives up their food, their heat, and their transportation bill so much that the Ontario Liberal leader, Bonnie Crombie, has said, I promise you, I will tell the Prime Minister he is wrong on issues like the carbon tax. Why won't he listen to Bonnie Crombie and other Liberals and call a carbon tax?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, Indigenous peoples across this country know better than most the costs of inaction on climate change, the impacts of extreme weather events, the impacts, quite frankly, of Conservative underinvestment for years in the kind of infrastructure and supports they needed. We turned that around, Mr. Speaker. We started treating Indigenous peoples and communities as partners. We invested in fighting climate change. We're putting more money back in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians with the Canada carbon rebate. We are continuing to make sure that protecting the environment and growing the economy for everyone goes hand in hand. That's the path forward.
The Honourable Member for Bellay-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister talked about seniors. Well, let's talk about them. The Prime Minister admitted that there was discrimination in increasing old age security for those 75 and over. His party says he supports our bill to end discrimination in general. He says he supports supply management, but he is not doing anything to support the swift passage of our supply management legislation. He should unblock things here in the House so that we can pass our anti-hate speech bill. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Yet another example, Mr. Speaker, of the Bloc Québécois looking to pick a fight. Meanwhile, we are delivering for Quebecers and Canadians. We are investing through dental care. We are helping seniors who have often a lot more expenses or maybe less savings. We are doing good things for all Quebecers and all Canadians. We will continue to be a partner to all. Meanwhile, the Bloc Québécois and the Conservative Party are trying to block this Parliament, and they're trying to block help and support to Canadians, to Quebecers, to seniors. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. We don't want any squabbles. We do want so-called common sense. We could unblock the Parliament unanimously. Here's what I want to see. I want to see each member in this place who won't rise to support a vote to put an end to hate propaganda and hate religion-based hatred. So who will vote for that bill? Will the government support it? Yes or no? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as we've said, we're very open to discussing and debating that matter. That said, we acknowledge that there can be more than one solution. There's no easy, quick fix solution. There might be many solutions. We need to keep working together. That's why we made Bill C-63 to tackle online hate. It will protect children. There will be solutions through C-63 to fight hate speech and discrimination, especially online. We do have work to do here in this House. So why doesn't the Bloc Québécois block Conservatives from continuing their filibustering? The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Halifax longshoremen, the unionized workers, have just put out a statement. On Monday, the NDP has the opportunity to reinforce that they will not bring in back-to-work legislation by supporting their own leaders' words. And below are those words in a copy of the common sense Conservative motion calling the Liberals, quoting the NDP Liberal leader as saying, the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. Will the NDP Liberals stand with unions and vote non-confidence in this costly government?
Hey, bravo!
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
We can tell, Mr. Speaker, why the Conservative leader is so desperate to bring Parliament to a halt, to prevent debate on matters that are actually going to deliver for Canadians. As we support Canadians, as we make investments that are growing the economy and showing up for Canadians, like the tax break over the next few months, the Conservative leader sees that we're actually solving some of the challenges that the global economy has tossed our way. These are things that we are focused on while he's focused on his own political partisan advantage and personal attacks. We're going to stay focused on Canadians, on delivering for them tangibly and concretely.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
His own party doesn't agree with him. He's so weak that the NDP keeps him in power while the Liberal Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador is attacking his energy cap. The Liberal Premier says that this reduction of 35% in Newfoundland's energy production is already sending investment away. We understand that President Trump wants to take our money in jobs. But why is the Prime Minister standing against his own Liberal Premier in Newfoundland and Labrador to help Trump do it?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, across the country, except on the Conservative benches, Canadians know climate change is real. Canadians are also stepping up in lots of different ways to help reduce their emissions, to grow the economy, to create a better future for their kids and grandkids. The multi-billion-dollar profitable industry that is the oil and gas industry right now has an unlimited ability to emit emissions into the atmosphere. We don't think any industry, particularly not one as wildly profitable as the oil and gas industry, should be able to have unlimited pollution. That's why we're putting a cap on emissions, not on production, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
That's factually false. The industry's emissions have been regulated for decades, Mr. Speaker, and he just wants to shut down their production and give more of the money and jobs to Donald Trump and the United States of America. And then there's the electricity tax. He calls it a regulation, but now we know that it's a tax because the independent Ontario energy operator says that this new regulation tax will drive up costs for families by $175 a year and will drive factories, mines, and mills south of the border. Why is it killing jobs with high electricity prices?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our oil and gas emissions cap is a cap on emissions, not on production, Mr. Speaker. No sector should be allowed unlimited pollution, and it's unfortunate the Conservatives continue to defend that incredibly profitable sector that is costing Canadians so much. The reality is we will continue to work with the industry that is working on reducing its emissions because we know that's how we protect oil and gas sector jobs into the future, by innovating, by bringing on better technologies, and by recognizing that no sector should have a right to pollute unlimitedly.
The Honourable Member for Alfred Pellan. Mr. Speaker, like everywhere in Canada, in my constituency, affordability is a major issue. My constituents in Alfred Pellan were pleased to hear that for the next few months they will have some relief thanks to the GST holiday. Can the Prime Minister tell Canadians how this GST holiday will help them? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I thank the member for Alfred Pellan for his question. We know that the past few years have been difficult for Canadians. This is why we are offering a tax break to all Canadians. This means that Canadians won't have to pay any taxes on groceries and other essential everyday products for 2 months. It makes no sense that the Conservative leader and his caucus voted against giving Canadians a GST holiday. We want Canadians to have more money in their pockets, but the Conservatives are opposed to cutting taxes. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. The Prime Minister has lost control. He's lost control of our borders and of immigration. He has, in fact, admitted so and has done a total 180 on immigration. Here's what we want to know. Will he take back control? Can he answer a very simple question? How many people stay here in Canada illegally?
Let's hear this one.
Mr. Speaker, after the pandemic, we helped provinces, businesses, small businesses throughout the country. They had labor shortage issues. That's why we allowed more people from abroad to come and work in Canada. Now the situation has changed. Thankfully, our immigration system is flexible. We brought down our immigration levels to guarantee that our economy can catch up with our growth. That's totally normal, Mr. Speaker, to adjust immigration levels based on the current situation in Canada. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. His government is supposed to oversee entry and exit into this country. So here's my very easy, simple question. How many people are here in Canada illegally? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, Canada has always had a generous but responsible immigration system. The integrity of our immigration system has always been strong and has led to strong growth, economic growth for our country over the past decades, and we will continue to uphold the integrity of our immigration system. We put in place measures to ensure that those whose visitor's visa or other types of visas and permit expire, so to ensure that they go home. Our system will remain thorough and will keep its integrity.
Head of the government, responsible for monitoring who comes in our borders and who leaves our borders. So surely he'll be able to answer a very simple question. How many are in Canada illegally?
Oh, he's not going to be able to answer it. Here we go.
Mr. Speaker, one of the things that has distinguished Canada from many countries around the world is our immigration system has always been supported by Canadians, by our citizens from coast to coast to coast, because it is a strong and robust system that adjusts according to the needs of our population, of our economy, of our growth paths, of our housing starts. And that is exactly what we continue to do. Where the Conservative leader is once again seeking to divide Canadians, seeking to import right-wing rhetoric from south of the border, we are going to continue to stay true to our Canadian values, deliver a strong and robust immigration system that meets Canadians' values and expectations.
I'd ask the honourable member from Abbotsford, please, not to take the mic. He's an experienced and well-respected member. The honourable member for Kings Hants.
Speaker, this summer, Canadians across the country were filled with immense pride watching Team Canada athletes represent us so well on the Olympic and Paralympic Games. In Kennecook, we gathered at Finley Park to celebrate Wyatt Sanford's Olympic bronze. In Rimouski, they cheered for Maud Charon, and in Victoria for the big man, Greg Stewart. That same story can be repeated for every single athlete who proudly wore the maple leaf in Paris. Can the Prime Minister explain how we are supporting our world-class athletes and why it is important to support Team Canada?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to join my voice to those on this side of the House who are very excited that we have Olympians and Paralympians in Parliament today. Here on Parliament Hill, making sure that Canadians who celebrated them throughout this exciting summer, watching our Olympians and Paralympians succeed and inspire Canadians is something we can continue to celebrate right now. We will always support our athletes and work to make sure they can represent their country the very best. That's why we're giving more money for our athletes, supporting pregnant athletes so they don't have to give up their careers to start a family. These are all initiatives we're working to move forward. Unfortunately, the Conservatives continue to obstruct this House and make it more difficult.
The honourable member from Churchill, Kiwatanaski.
Mr. Speaker, today we recognize the incredible hard work and dedication of our Olympic athletes. We have so much to be proud of, and that's why it was so unfair that the soccer drone scandal distracted from the fact that Canada's athletes earned the podium. Many Canadians, including former athletes, have been calling on the government to do the right thing, bring about full accountability in terms of the drone scandal and the culture surrounding it so that it never happens again. So why are the Liberals blocking efforts at accountability at the Heritage Committee? Why is this minister refusing to be accountable?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this summer we celebrated our Canadian athletes with everything we had from coast to coast to coast. It was very, very exciting. Yes, the incident with drones and Soccer Canada was extremely unfortunate. That's why there have been consequences. That's why we continue to ensure there are follow-ups on that. As the member well knows, committees in Parliament are independent and do their work independently, but we will continue to make sure that the extraordinary support that all Canadians, not
All right, next topic. Come on, let's go.
volunteers give to
And of all the things you guys could talk about,
our continues unabated.
The Honourable Member for Richmond-Arthabasca. Mr. Speaker, over 135,000 passports are stuck in Canada Post warehouses or withheld by Service Canada because of the strike. As a result, many Canadians and Quebecers are anxious and they're scrambling to get their documents before they leave on holiday or visit loved ones in another country. Can the Prime Minister tell us whether there is a Plan B? Has his government planned any urgent measures in order to ensure that these Canadians receive their passports and can travel on time? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we're working with both sides, both parties, to put an end to this post-Canada strike. We meet with Canada Post and with the union frequently. We want to help them resolve this dispute as quickly as possible. We know that many people are suffering from this strike, such as small businesses. As a result of the strike, we've opened more Service Canada locations. We know that this is difficult for many Canadians, and we will do everything we need to do to ensure that Canadians get their passports so that they can go on their winter vacations.
Before moving to the point of order, I have a recognition in the gallery.
Presence of the gallery of the Honourable Tracy Ann McPhee, Minister of Health and Social Services.
All right, guys, will point of order get crazy? Right now, they're doing a little bit of recognition for somebody in the audience. Apparently, you need to be personally invited by a MP or somebody that works in the House to attend. I believe that's how that works.
The honourable member for Drummond is rising on a point of order.
Point of order.
Mr. Speaker, there have been consultations between the parties, and I think you will find unanimous consent to the following motion. That the House affirms that no... No, I'm afraid I've already heard no's.
Oh, shut them down right away. Darth Fungus said no.
I will recognize the honourable member in a moment. The person next on my list is the honourable member from Don Valley West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's rare for me to rise on a point of order in this House. However, as I try to keep my head down and attempt to focus on the issues being raised, I feel the need to draw your attention to the increase in name-calling during question period. Earlier today, the Leader of the Opposition referred to the member from Burnaby South by what I would consider to be an unparliamentary moniker, 2 words beginning with M that I will not repeat here. We're about to welcome, Mr. Speaker, we're about to welcome athletes who have represented our country with excellence, with appropriate nature, and are truly honourable. And I would ask that you continue to be vigilant and ensure that the decorum in this House is maintained, and that you ask members to apologize for using ridiculous monikers with honourable members. Thank you.
Boo-hoo?
Order. I appreciate the intervention from the honourable member from Don Valley West, and I did notice as well a number of monikers which are being used from various folks in this House. This is something to consider and to review, and I will take a careful note of the honourable member's intervention and come back to the House. I see that the honourable member from Nunavut is rising on a point of order.
I'm rising on a point of order. According to the House of Commons Procedures and Practice Chapter 3, this is to address the repeatedly putting on record information that is not accurate. And I would like to ask the Leader of the Conservative Party to withdraw and apologize for claiming that Indigenous peoples, belong to the Conservatives. He needs to stop using terms that are possessive when it comes to Indigenous peoples, especially when he has met regularly with residential school deniers, and I do hope that he stands up to apologize to Indigenous peoples.
Oh boy, here we go.
Thank the honourable member from Nunavut for raising this issue. I will again take a look at the record and come back to the House if necessary. Colleagues.
Colleagues, please.
Honourable colleagues, it being 3:30, Pursuant to order made on Thursday, November 7, 2024, the House will now resolve itself into Committee of the Whole to welcome Canada's 2024 Paris Olympic and Paralympic Game athletes.
All right, guys, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I have no idea what's going on, but both sides are pretty full. Not many people have left, so... Oh, the scepter of power has been moved.
Dear colleagues, on November 7th, 2024, the House unanimously adopted the following motion. That notwithstanding any special orders or usual practice of the House, at the expiry of the time allotted for oral questions on Wednesday, December 4th, 2024, the House resolve itself into Committee of the Whole in order to welcome the Canadian athletes of the Olympic and Paralympic Games in Paris in 2024 with... I'm sorry, order please. Order please.
They didn't mute the House. This is so awkward.
A, the Speaker makes opening remarks on behalf of the House, and B, the names of athletes present be deemed read and printed in the debates of the House of Commons of that day.
Seating of the committee have concluded. The committee shall rise. And D, and this is very important for members to hear this again, only authorized photographers be permitted to take photos during the proceedings of the committee. I know that my honourable colleagues are as excited as I am to welcome these extraordinary Canadians. We have many athletes to celebrate, too many actually, to fit all together in this chamber, so we will be welcoming them